July 11th, 1944, Normandy, near Saint-Lô. The hedgerow erupts in dirt and splintered wood as a 75mm shell slams into the edge of the field. The concussion ripples through the tall grass and rattles the steel hull of a German Panzer IV sitting at an awkward angle in the mud, its right track half buried, its nose dipped forward like a wounded animal. Inside the turret, Obergefreiter Karl Weiss braces himself against the recoil that never comes. The engine is still running, coughing unevenly. Smoke seeps in through a hairline crack near the rear plate, sharp and oily. "Transmission's gone!" the driver shouts again, panic bleeding through his voice. "We're not moving!" Weiss already knows. He can feel it in the way the tank sits, alive but helpless. In Normandy, that usually means only one thing: abandon it. Since June, German tank crews have learned the pattern quickly. A hit doesn't have to penetrate to be fatal. If the tank cannot retreat under its own power, it is finished. Not because it cannot be repaired, but because it will never be allowed the time to be repaired. Waiting means fighter bombers. Waiting means artillery. Waiting means being hunted until the tank burns or the crew is pulled out at gunpoint. Weiss reaches for the hatch lever. "Prepare to abandon." He stops mid-sentence. Through the narrow vision slit, beyond a gap torn in the hedgerow, something unexpected moves in the American lines. At first he thinks it is infantry maneuvering. Then he realizes the shapes are wrong. Too large. Too deliberate. An American Sherman sits disabled roughly 200 meters away, its track blown clean off, hull tilted, turret still facing forward. Weiss had noticed it earlier and mentally marked it as another success, another wreck to be counted later. But now, smoke blooms around it. Not panicked smoke. Not the chaotic haze of a withdrawal. This is thick, white, controlled. And behind it, something lumbers forward. A vehicle without a turret. Boxy, purposeful. A crane arm folded low along its side. Weiss blinks, convinced for a second that exhaustion has finally caught up with him. A recovery vehicle. It rolls into view with no urgency, no hesitation, stopping beside the disabled Sherman as if the battlefield were a workshop floor. American crewmen jump down immediately. One waves his arm, another throws a cable. The winch spools out with a metallic whine. "They're insane," the loader mutters. "They're trying to tow it. Right now." Machine gun fire snaps overhead. An artillery round cracks somewhere behind them. None of it changes the rhythm of the work. The winch engages. Steel cable goes taut. Slowly, painfully, the Sherman begins to move. Weiss watches, frozen, as the tank that should have been lost slides backward through the smoke, dragged inch by inch into a sunken lane. Within minutes, it disappears completely. Gone, not destroyed, recovered. No one in Weiss's crew speaks. The silence inside the turret feels heavier than any shell burst. "That tank," the driver says quietly. "It wasn't dead." "No," Weiss replies, his voice tight. "It was rescued." The word feels foreign, wrong. German doctrine includes recovery. On paper, in training manuals, in staff lectures from years ago. But in Normandy, recovery has become a fantasy. Recovery vehicles are slow, vulnerable, prime targets for Allied air power. Most have already been destroyed or sit idle for lack of fuel and spare parts. The last Bergerpanzer assigned to Weiss's battalion was knocked out days earlier while trying to tow a Panther under rocket attack. Since then, every immobilized tank has met the same fate. Abandon, destroy optics, spike the gun, walk away. Weiss understands something else now. Something colder. The Americans can afford to stop fighting for a moment to save a machine. They have air cover. They have smoke. They have recovery assets built for this exact purpose. And more importantly, they have planned for this moment. The Sherman that just vanished will not be stripped for parts. It will not rust in a field. It will be repaired, refueled, and returned to the line. A runner slams into the side of the Panzer IV, breathless. "Orders from battalion! Fall back on foot! Leave the tank!" Weiss hesitates. For one absurd second, he imagines waiting, staying with the tank. Imagines a German recovery vehicle appearing out of the hedgerow the way the American one just did. He knows better. None is coming. He climbs out, boots sinking into the wet earth, and turns back once more. In the sunlight, the Panzer IV looks intact, scarred, but salvageable. In another army, under another doctrine, it might fight again. Here it will be left behind. As Weiss retreats into the hedgerows, the image burns into his mind. Not the American tank, but what arrived first. Not infantry, not ammunition, not officers, a recovery vehicle. An army that sends mechanics into a firefight before replacement tanks. An army that treats damaged machines not as expendable, but as temporarily inconvenienced. For the first time since Normandy began, Karl Weiss understands that the Americans are not just winning battles. They are refusing to lose them the way Germany does. July 12, 1944, Normandy, outside Le Désert. The field is quiet in a way that feels wrong. No gunfire, no engines. Just the faint hiss of cooling metal and the buzz of flies already gathering. Scattered across the churned earth lie the remains of what German staff officers once called Schlagkraft, combat power. Panzer IVs sit nose down in shell craters, tracks half buried. A panther leans awkwardly against a hedgerow, its long 75mm gun still elevated, optics shattered, crew long gone. None of them are burning, none are twisted wrecks. They are simply left. Hauptmann Ernst Becker walks the line slowly, boots sinking into damp soil. He has commanded tanks since 1941. Russia, Kursk, Italy. He knows what a battlefield usually looks like after an armored clash. This is different. These are recoverable, he says quietly, stopping beside a panther with a thrown track. He crouches, runs a hand along the exposed suspension. At least half of them. His battalion commander doesn't answer. Because they both know the truth. Recoverable does not mean recoverable for them. In the early years of the war, German recovery doctrine had been meticulous. Berger Panzer crews followed armored spearheads closely. Disabled vehicles were towed back under cover of smoke, repaired in forward workshops, returned to action. In Russia, entire maintenance parks operated just kilometers behind the front. That world no longer exists. Now, recovery vehicles are among the most dangerous things to operate. Slow, loud, vulnerable. Allied fighter bombers hunt them relentlessly. Fuel shortages mean even reaching a disabled tank can be impossible. Spare parts arrive sporadically, if at all. Trained mechanics have been killed, wounded, or reassigned to infantry units to fill gaps. Becker stands, brushing mud from his gloves. "This would take 2 days," he says, nodding toward the panther. "Maybe 3. 2 days we don't have," the commander replies. They move on. Later that afternoon, Becker raises his binoculars and watches the Americans do it again. A Sherman has been knocked out near the edge of a village, hit by a concealed Pak-40. Smoke curls from the engine compartment. German infantry nearby expect the usual sequence. Crew bails, ammunition cooks off, the tank burns, the Americans pull back. Instead, white smoke blankets the street, then movement. Not retreat, approach. 2 American vehicles roll forward, one an M32 recovery vehicle, the other a Sherman positioning itself to provide cover. Infantry spreads out immediately, rifles up, establishing a perimeter not to advance, but to protect space. Becker hears one of his lieutenants laugh, a short, incredulous sound. "They're treating it like a broken truck," the man says, "like they'll just fix it and drive on." And they do. The Americans do not rush. They do not hesitate either. Cables are thrown. The winch engages. The disabled Sherman shifts, then slides backward under a cover of smoke. A medic kneels beside a wounded crewman, even as the operation continues. Within minutes, the tank is gone. Becker lowers the binoculars slowly. "They are not afraid of losing tanks," he says. "They are afraid of losing time." That distinction gnaws at him. German tank crews are trained to preserve themselves, not the machine. A disabled tank is a liability, a magnet for fire. Crews are praised for escaping intact, not for saving equipment. American crews behave differently. They stay with disabled tanks longer. They do not panic when immobilized. They wait. Because they expect help. That belief changes everything. It means crews hold positions longer. It means commanders take calculated risks. It means a hit does not immediately equal loss. Becker's own crews know the opposite is true for them. Once mobility is lost, the tank is effectively dead. Every breakdown becomes existential. Every mechanical failure feels final. That fear compounds. That evening, a young lieutenant approaches Becker, face drawn. "Sir, we spiked 3 guns today. Abandoned 2 tanks that only needed towing." "Did we have recovery assets?" Becker asks, though he already knows the answer. The lieutenant shakes his head. Becker looks away. This is how armies bleed without fighting. Not in explosions, but in quiet forfeits. In an American after-action report written the same day, a lieutenant notes blandly, "2 Shermans disabled by enemy fire, both recovered under smoke. Estimated return to service, 24 to 48 hours. No emphasis, no drama, just procedure." American doctrine does not treat tanks as disposable shells fired into the enemy. They are assets to be preserved, repaired, and cycled back into combat. The Germans, by 1944, are doing the opposite. They preserve men. They sacrifice machines. The Americans preserve machines. They rotate men, and the effect is cumulative. Over the next days, Becker sees the same American units again and again. The same silhouettes, the same tanks, sometimes visibly patched, weld seams rough, paint mismatched. One Sherman rolls past with a dent in the glacier's plate Becker recognizes. "It's back," he whispers. His loader stares. "That's impossible." "No," Becker replies quietly. "It's inevitable." Each recovered tank represents more than saved steel. It preserves training, logistics, and experience. A repaired tank means no replacement needed. A crew that trusts recovery fights differently. German intelligence will later call this material elasticity. At the front, Becker calls it something simpler, momentum. By the time the fighting shifts closer to St. Lo, Becker understands something he never learned at Kursk or Kharkov. The Americans are not winning because their tanks are better. They are winning because their tanks are rarely allowed to die. July 18th, 1944, near St. Lo. Dawn breaks through low cloud, the light thin and grey, clinging to the hedgerows like damp cloth. The smell of churned earth and burned cordite still hangs in the air from yesterday's fighting. For Hauptmann Ernst Becker, the battlefield looks familiar, until he sees what is moving. American tanks, advancing along the same hedgerow line his battalion fought over the day before. He raises his binoculars slowly, already knowing what unsettles him before his mind fully accepts it. He recognizes them, not the crews, the machines. A Sherman with a scorched turret cheek where German fire struck home. Another with a mismatched road wheel, the steel rim darker, newer than the rest. A third bearing a crude weld seam across the rear hull, Fresh, ugly, unmistakable. These were hit, Becker murmurs. Yesterday. His gunner squints. They should be gone. They are not, Becker replies. This is the moment when something fundamental shifts. The Americans are not rotating tanks out of combat. They are recycling them through it. In the German army, a tank that leaves the line rarely returns. Even minor damage can immobilize a vehicle for weeks if it is not abandoned outright. Repair requires time, parts, fuel, and safety. None of those exist in sufficient quantity anymore. For the Americans, repair is not an exception. It is assumed. Behind the advancing Shermans, Becker spots the shapes he now dreads more than tanks themselves. M32 recovery vehicles, cranes folded low, cables coiled neatly. They move with the column, never far enough forward to draw fire, never far enough back to be irrelevant. The choreography is deliberate. If a Sherman throws a track, smoke is deployed. If it takes a hit, infantry closes in. If the engine dies, cables appear almost immediately. The tank does not become a corpse. It becomes a patient. Becker has never seen armor treated this way. Later that day, during a brief lull, a captured American sergeant is brought in, dusty, tired, calm in a way Becker finds unsettling. Through an interpreter, Becker asks the question that has been burning in his mind. Why do your crews stay with disabled tanks? He asks. They are targets. The sergeant shrugs slightly. Because we know they'll come get us. Even under fire? The man nods. That's what the smoke's for. Becker presses. And if they can't? The sergeant thinks for a moment. Then we spike it. But that's rare. Rare. That word lands harder than any shell, because for Becker's battalion, abandoning tanks has become routine. A broken final drive, a fuel pump failure, a track pin lost during a night movement. Each one costs them a fighting vehicle they will never see again. Not because the damage is severe, but because the system to save it no longer exists. German recovery units, once plentiful, have been stripped away to cover other crises. Fuel shortages mean even towing a tank 10 kilometers can be impossible. Allied air superiority turns every daylight movement into a gamble. The Americans face the same threats, and yet they recover anyway. That afternoon, Becker watches as one Sherman bogs down in a muddy field, its tracks spinning uselessly. Almost immediately, another tank positions itself at an angle. Cables thrown, engines revving in unison. Infantry forms a tight ring, rifles outward. The extraction takes less than 10 minutes. The disabled Sherman lurches free, limping but alive. Becker's loader whispers, "They won't stop." "No," Becker says quietly. "They don't need to." Radio intercepts that evening bring more bad news. Another German armored company has withdrawn, not destroyed, not overrun, simply reduced below operational strength due to mechanical losses. 3 tanks abandoned during a night march, 2 more left behind after running out of fuel. None destroyed by enemy fire, all gone. Becker begins to understand that American recovery doctrine is not about bravery or stubbornness. It is about arithmetic. Every tank recovered saves hundreds of man-hours of production. Every tank repaired saves weeks of shipping time. Every crew kept in its vehicle saves months of retraining. Multiply that across dozens of engagements, and the result is overwhelming. The Germans destroy tanks one by one. The Americans deny destruction wholesale. By evening, Becker's battalion is ordered to fall back again. As they withdraw, he looks one last time across the field. American armor continues to move. Not fresh, not pristine, but persistent. One Sherman rolls past with chalk markings on its turret, an arrow pointing to a patched section with the date written beside it. It is not camouflage, it is confidence. That tank has already been counted as lost once, and it came back. Becker feels something close to despair. Not fear of the enemy, but fear of futility. How do you defeat an opponent whose weapons refuse to stay dead? Later that night, Becker writes in his field notebook, the pencil shaking slightly in his hand. We fight machines as if they are men, mortal, fragile, irreplaceable. He pauses, listening to distant engines that never seem to fade. The Americans fight machines as machines, meant to break, meant to be repaired, meant to return. He closes the notebook slowly. Tomorrow, more American tanks will appear. Some of them will be the same ones he fought today. And Becker knows, with a certainty that chills him, that even if he destroys them again, they will come back. July 25th, 1944. The outskirts of Coutances. Rain falls in thin sheets, turning the Norman roads into slick ribbons of mud and oil. The retreat has no rhythm anymore, only pressure. Hauptmann Ernst Becker stands beside what remains of his company, 4 operational Panthers, where there had once been 14. None were lost in a dramatic last stand. None burned under overwhelming assault. They simply disappeared. 2 threw tracks during the withdrawal and were abandoned under fighter-bomber threat. 1 ran dry when a fuel truck never arrived. Another lost its transmission to a mechanical failure that could have been repaired if there had been time, tools, or safety. There was none. Becker watches American armor advancing cautiously through the village ahead. Again, he recognizes details that should not exist. A Sherman with a dented glacis plate crudely hammered back into shape. Another bearing a replacement gun mantlet, painted a lighter shade, unblended. A third trailing a faint plume of smoke. Not combat damage, but a lingering engine problem, tolerated because the tank still moves. They accept imperfection, Becker mutters. His driver, Feldwebel Kruger, nods. Because they can fix it later. That is the difference Becker cannot escape. For the Germans, combat is a process of irreversible loss. Each engagement leaves them weaker than before. Every withdrawal is permanent subtraction. For the Americans, combat is interruption. Their tanks leave the line, disappear briefly, then return. Sometimes scarred, sometimes altered, but functional. Becker sees this firsthand during an engagement near a crossroads. His remaining Panthers ambush a column of Shermans, disabling 2 with precise fire. 1 burns. The other sits immobilized, track shattered, hull intact. Becker expects the Americans to pull back. Instead, they push infantry forward aggressively, not to advance, but to hold space. Mortars lay down smoke. And then Becker spots the silhouette he now dreads more than tanks themselves, a recovery vehicle. An M32 eases forward behind the infantry screen, crane swinging deliberately, unhurried. It does not rush. It does not hide its purpose. It assumes it will succeed. Becker orders fire, redirected toward it. The Panther fires, and immediately American artillery answers. The ground erupts around Becker's position. Shrapnel hammers the turret. Kruger shouts as the engine stalls. Becker has no choice. He orders withdrawal. When the smoke clears, the disabled Sherman is gone. Not destroyed, gone. Later that day, Becker intercepts a transmission from higher command. Another order to consolidate armor units, due to non-combat losses. The phrase feels like an accusation. Non-combat. As if combat were no longer the primary enemy. That night, Becker sits with other surviving officers in a ruined farmhouse. Maps are spread across a table lit by a single lantern. The conversation is quiet, bitter. "We cannot keep pace," one officer says. "Not in tanks, not in time." Another replies, "We destroy them faster than before. It changes nothing." Becker speaks at last. "Because destruction is no longer decisive." They look at him. "When we disable an American tank," Becker continues, "we have not removed it. We have only delayed it." Silence follows. "The implication is unbearable. German doctrine still assumes that destroying equipment degrades future combat power. American doctrine assumes equipment will be destroyed and plans beyond it. Recovery vehicles are not auxiliary assets, they are front-line weapons. Becker realizes that American armored strength is not measured by tanks present in the moment, but by tanks recoverable over time, and that number is far larger. In the days that follow, Becker's battalion ceases to function as an armored unit. It becomes a mobile delay force, ambushing, withdrawing, abandoning vehicles whenever necessary. Each retreat leaves more steel behind. American columns, meanwhile, grow denser, not because they are untouched, but because they are maintained. Becker watches one final engagement from a distant ridge. A Sherman platoon advances cautiously, one tank lagging behind with obvious mechanical trouble. An American officer waves it aside, signaling it back toward a concealed maintenance area. The platoon continues without it. Replacement behavior. The tank is not mourned, it is scheduled. Becker understands then that American strength does not come from keeping everything alive. It comes from deciding what must keep moving and ensuring it does. That night, Becker writes another entry in his notebook, his handwriting tight and precise. We destroy their tanks, they deny us the result. He pauses, then adds one more line. A weapon that returns from damage is more dangerous than one never hit. By the end of July, Becker's Panthers are gone, some burned, most abandoned, all irreplaceable. American Shermans continue forward, patched, repaired, pulled from ditches, returned to service. And Becker finally understands the cruelest lesson of the campaign. He has not been fighting American tanks. He has been fighting American recovery. March 7th, 1945, west bank of the Rhine, near Remagen. Smoke drifts low across the river, clinging to shattered buildings and twisted steel like a second skin. The Ludendorff Bridge still stands, cracked, scarred, groaning under strain. But it stands. That alone feels impossible. American infantry pours across in tight columns. MPs shout directions. Engineers sprint with coils of wire and crates of explosives. Somewhere upstream, German artillery fires sporadically. Too late, too scattered to change what is already happening. Armor is coming next. Lieutenant Hans Richter, formerly of a Panzer Grenadier unit, watches from a concealed observation point before surrendering later that day. What he sees unsettles him more than the bridge itself. A Sherman stalls halfway across. The engine coughs. The track grinds uselessly against steel decking. For a fraction of a second, traffic compresses behind it. In the German army, this would be catastrophe. A blockage, a delay, a target. Richter expects confusion. He expects officers shouting, men scattering, the column freezing under fire. None of that happens. Instead, recovery crews move as if rehearsed. An M26 Dragon wagon noses forward, cables already unspooling. Engineers lay planks without being asked. MPs reroute foot traffic around the immobilized tank. Infantry continues crossing, stepping past the scene without breaking stride. The winch tightens. The Sherman slides free. Another tank rolls forward to take its place. The bridge never stops flowing. Richter lowers his binoculars slowly. They didn't stop traffic, he mutters. Not for fire, not for damage, not even for wrecks. That detail stays with him long after the war ends, because it captures the final evolution of American armored doctrine. By 1945, recovery is no longer reactive. It is anticipatory. Every armored advance carries its shadow. Recovery vehicles, maintenance trucks, fuel, spare crews. Tank battalions do not advance alone. They advance as systems designed to absorb failure without pausing. A tank disabled is not a crisis. It is an obstacle to be removed. On the far bank, American armor spreads outward like ink on paper. The crossing does not feel heroic. It feels procedural. For the Germans watching from scattered positions, the message is unmistakable. Even now, at the end, with fuel gone, with reserves exhausted, the Americans do not pause to mourn broken machines. They remove them, replace them, continue. Richter surrenders that afternoon. Weeks later, in captivity, he will struggle to explain to interrogators why the Rhine crossing broke whatever resistance remained. It wasn't the bridge, he says finally. It was that nothing ever jammed. Throughout the war, German doctrine treated immobilization as defeat. A tank that cannot move is a liability. Recovery under fire is discouraged, often impossible due to fuel shortages, lack of specialized vehicles, or Allied air superiority. So German crews make rational decisions. They abandon early. They withdraw to avoid breakdown. They destroy machines they might have saved. American crews make different decisions. They hold positions longer. They take risk knowing recovery is coming. They fight knowing that even a disabled tank may still serve tomorrow. By 1945, the difference is no longer subtle. German armored formations are hollowed out, not only by enemy fire, but by cumulative abandonment. Panthers and Tigers litter roadsides, mechanically sound, tactically useful but immobilized and left behind. American armored formations remain dense. A Sherman knocked out in the morning may be back by evening. A tank disabled today may be in tomorrow's attack. A crew pulled out this week may be recrewed next. Nothing is sacred except momentum. Colonel James H. Polk, an American armored commander, will later explain it without ceremony. A tank's job is to keep the attack moving. If it can't do that today, we fix it so it can do it tomorrow. If we can't fix it, we strip it so another one can. There is no romance in the statement, only process. As American columns push deeper into Germany, the pattern repeats endlessly. A tank burns, another replaces it. A unit slows, another rotates in. Equipment fails, recovery arrives first. That is what German tank crews never anticipated. Not the Shermans, not the numbers, not even the air power, but the fact that destruction itself had been demoted from catastrophe to inconvenience. For German crews, every hit carries finality. For American crews, every hit carries probability. Can it be recovered? Can it be repaired? Can it return? If the answer to any of those is yes, the battle continues unchanged. By April 1945, German armored resistance collapses everywhere at once. Not because German crews lack skill or courage, but because the system supporting them has disintegrated. No fuel, no spare parts, no recovery, no margin. Every breakdown is permanent. Every delay is fatal. The Americans cross Germany not as conquerors racing ahead, but as a rolling machine that absorbs friction and keeps moving anyway. And when German tank crews look back, what haunts them is not the firepower that destroyed their machines. It is the realization that for the Americans, a destroyed tank was never the end of the story. It was merely the beginning of the next one. April 1945, Central Germany. The war is collapsing inward now. Roads choke with refugees. Columns of prisoners march west under guard. Villages surrender without resistance. For the first time in years, German tank crews are no longer being ordered forward. They are being ordered to disappear. Oberleutnant Karl Weiss moves on foot through a forest road slick with spring mud. His boots worn thin, his uniform no longer marking him clearly as anything at all. His Panther is gone, abandoned weeks earlier after a final drive failure during a night withdrawal. The crew destroyed what they could and vanished into the trees. That Panther never burned. It never fought its last battle. It simply stopped existing. Along the roadside, Weiss passes more of them. A Tiger with intact armor plates, hatches open, gun still elevated. A Panzer IV sunk axle deep in mud, track thrown, engine cold. Another Panther, optics smashed, breech spiked, abandoned without a single enemy shell hitting it. They are not wrecks, they are forfeits. Weiss realizes that for months now, German armor has not been destroyed. It has been surrendered to logistics. Every mechanical failure, every fuel shortage, every minor breakdown has carried the same sentence: permanent loss. Not because the damage was fatal, because there was no system left to reverse it. That is the truth German tank crews finally understand in the final weeks. They did not lose their tanks because the Americans were better shots. They lost them because the Americans refused to let tanks stay lost. In captured depots and temporary American maintenance parks, Weiss sees the other side of the equation for the first time. Rows of Shermans in every condition imaginable, some freshly painted, some patched with crude welds, some missing road wheels, some with engines swapped in the open air. Mechanics work without urgency, but without pause. Clipboards move. Parts are catalogued. Recovery crews roll in and out constantly, towing damaged vehicles like wounded animals brought back from the field. Nothing here feels improvised. This is not emergency repair. This is routine. An American maintenance officer explains it to a group of German POWs almost casually. If it's knocked out but intact, we fix it. If it's too damaged, we strip it. If it can't be used, it feeds another tank. One of the Germans asks the question that has been circling all of them. And if you lose it again? The officer shrugs. Then we do it again. That answer lands heavier than any defeat, because it reveals the final asymmetry of the armored war. Germany built tanks as masterpieces, complex, powerful, expensive, irreplaceable. America built tanks as components, meant to break, meant to be repaired, meant to return. German doctrine treated immobilization as defeat. American doctrine treated immobilization as a problem to be solved. The difference compounds over time. Every recovered American tank preserves trained crew, production effort, a shipping capacity, operational tempo. Every abandoned German tank erases all of those at once. By the spring of 1945, German armored formations exist mostly on paper. Crews fight on foot. Commanders plan without armor. Even when tanks are present, they are husbanded, withdrawn early, preserved out of fear of losing them permanently. That caution becomes paralysis. American commanders feel the opposite pressure. They push armor aggressively because they know recovery follows. They risk immobilization because immobilization is not final. They plan offensives assuming a percentage of tanks will be hit and assuming most will return. Loss is built into the schedule. That is the lesson German crews learn too late. In interrogations after the surrender, the same observation appears again and again in German testimonies. We destroyed many tanks. It did not reduce their strength. We disabled them. They returned. We fought the same machines twice. American officers listen carefully. They understand what they built, not an army that avoided loss, an army that refused to let loss decide outcomes. Recovery vehicles never appear in victory photographs. They do not fire guns. They do not take ground, but they ensure that ground taken stays taken. They turn damage into delay, defeat into inconvenience, destruction into probability. When the war ends in May 1945, thousands of American tanks sit idle, some to be scrapped, some to be shipped home, some to fight another war years later. They were never meant to be immortal. They were meant to be reusable. Carl Weiss, standing in a POW camp weeks later, watches American mechanics strip a Sherman for parts. The tank is scarred, ugly, mismatched. It has clearly been hit before and repaired. He thinks back to his Panther, abandoned intact in a French field, already rusting by now. The contrast finally crystallizes. The Americans did not win the armored war by building tanks that never broke. They won it by building a system that assumed everything would break and planned to survive it anyway. That is why recovery vehicles arrived first, not as an afterthought, not as support, but as the quiet foundation of momentum. And that, more than guns or armor thickness or kill ratios, is why German tank crews were stunned. Because by the time they understood what they were really fighting, it was already over.